Men go mad in this line of work. Read a book called The Dharma Bums by Jack Kerouac and you'll see what I mean. He spent a summer as fire lookout in a shack on Sourdough Mountain in the Cascades. A lookout haunted by the spirit of Gary Jaffe Ryder Snyder, who had also worked there. Kerouac never recovered. A few years later, the Forest Service offered me the same job at the same place, trying to maintain their literary reputation. Prudently, I turned it down. Women, too, go mad in the solitary confinement of a mountain peak, though not so readily as men, being stronger, more stable creatures with a lower center of gravity. Perhaps the severest test of a marriage is to assign a man and wife to a fire lookout. Any couple who survive 3 or 4 months with no human company but each other are destined for a long, permanent relationship. They deserve it. My career as a fire lookout began by chance. Having injured my knee during the Vietnam War, skiing in Colorado, I was unable to resume my usual summer job as patrol ranger in a certain notorious southwestern national park. I requested a desk job. The chief ranger thought I lacked the competence to handle government paperwork. He offered me instead the only job in the park that required less brains, he said, than janitor, garbage collector, or park superintendent. He made me fire lookout on what is called the North Rim, a post so remote there was little likelihood I'd either see or be seen by the traveling American public. The lookout tower on North Rim was 60 feet tall, surmounted by a little tin box 6 feet by 6 by 7. One entered through a trapdoor in the bottom. Inside was the firefinder, an azimuth sighting device, fixed to a cabinet bolted to the floor. There was a high swivel chair with glass insulators, like those on a telephone line, mounted on the lower tips of the chair's 4 legs, in case of lightning. It was known as the electric chair. The actual operations of a fire lookout, quite simple, I've described elsewhere. My home, after working hours, was an old cabin near the foot of the tower. The cabin was equipped with a double bed and a couple of folding steel cots, a wood-burning stove, table, shelves, cupboard, 2 chairs. It made a pleasant home, there under the pines and aspen, deep in the forest, serenaded by distant coyote cries, by poor wills, and sometimes by the song of the hermit thrush, loveliest of bird calls in the American West. My father came to visit one day and stayed for the season. He was given the job of relief lookout on my days off. In the evenings after supper, we played horseshoes. Whenever I hear the jangle of horseshoes now, I think of North Rim, of that forest, that cabin, that summer. My father has powerful hands, hard, gnarled, a logger's hands, very large. In his hand, a playing horseshoe looks like a quoit. A horse's shoe can hardly be seen at all. His pitch is low and accurate, the shoe, open end forward, sliding with a soft chunk full upon the upright, rigid peg. A firm connection. "Top that ringer, son," he'd say. We walked the Grand Canyon from rim to rim that summer, and once again a few years ago. The second time, he was 72 years old. The first sensible thing I did at North Rim, before my father appeared, was fall in love with the ranger. Not the chief ranger, but the one who manned the park entrance station a few miles down the road. Park Ranger Hendrickson, GS4, was one of those golden Californians from the San Diego area. She wore her sea-bleached hair in a heavy ponytail that fell below her clavicles. Like most girl swimmers, she had a well-developed pair of lungs, much admired by the boys. Pretty as a winesap in September, she looked especially fetching in her ranger suit, broad-brimmed straw hat, white blouse with Park Service pin, the snug skirt of forest green twill that ended, as was the fashion then, a good 6 inches above her knees. Like most sexual perverts, I've always suffered from a fatal weakness for women in uniform, for cheerleaders, majorettes, waitresses, meter maids, prison matrons, and so on. On my first meeting with Bonnie Hendrickson, as we shall here name the young woman, I said to her frankly, "You know, I've always wanted to lift a ranger's skirt." "You'll need a hiking permit," she replied. A quick-witted girl with a BA in French. We soon became good friends. On my days off, I sometimes helped her get through the tedious hours at the entrance station. While she leaned out her little window, collecting entrance fees from the tourists, answering questions, chatting about Smokey the Boar and the fire danger, I was kneeling at her feet, unseen from outside, gently rolling down the ranger's pantyhose. We played various such experiments in self-control. I experimented, she displayed the self-control. An innocent game, like horseshoes, with similar principles. Toplet ringer. On her days off, she would visit me in the lookout tower, assisting me in my duties. As I'd be reporting a fire over the Park Service radio system, she was unbuttoning my Levi's. "Fire dispatch," I said into the microphone. "This is North Rim Lookout." "Yeah," the fire dispatcher had the weary, cynical voice of a police desk sergeant. "What's your problem now, Abbey?" "Reporting a smoke, sir." "Yeah? And where do you think this one is, Abbey?" "Well, sir, I've got a reading of 042 degrees and 30... Ooh, watch those fingernails. 30 minutes near Fredonia." "Yeah?" A long pause, then the weary voice. "I hate to tell you this, Abbey, but that's the same fire you reported last week. Like I told you then, that's the Fredonia sawmill, and it's been smoking away in that same spot for 55 years. 10-4? "Yes, sir, 10-4. Oh, Christ, oh, yes. No swearing on the airwaves. These here transmissions are monitored by the Federal Communications Commission." One cold, rainy afternoon, Bonnie and I were down in the cabin on the bed, a fire crackling in the stove, when our experiments were interrupted by a banging on the door. Bonnie ducked beneath the covers. I yanked on my pants and cracked the door open. Two Park Service firefighters stood there grinning at me through the drizzle, their truck snuggled against the plump, round rear of Bonnie's little car. "Hey, Ed," says one, "we got a report of a hot fire in this area." "Get out of here." I slammed and barred the door. But I don't want to give the impression that a fire lookout's life is all work. There was time for play. One night a week, we'd drive to the village on the canyon rim and visit the bar. My Hopi friend would be there, old Sam Banyaka, the shaman, and the veteran mule wrangler, known only as Wallapai, a leathery runt of an Indian cowboy who always squatted on top of his bar stool, having never learned to sit anything but a horse. Behind the bar was Robert, the intellectual bartender, smug smirk on his fat face, about to recite a new limerick. He claimed to be the only living composer of original limericks in America. I still remember two of them. I wish I could forget.